Stories of Great Christians. From its radio studios in Chicago, the Moody Bible Institute greets its friends everywhere with Chapter 12 in the transcribed story of Peter Marshall, Chaplain to the United States Senate. The story is based on Catherine Marshall's biography, A Man Called Peter, published by the McGraw-Hill Book Company.
Be in Washington in about 20 minutes, Catherine.
I wish we didn't have to stop there, Peter. I'd like to go right on to New York.
Well, it'll be only for a few hours, dear. I think we owe our friends this courtesy, especially since they asked us to stop. Are you tired?
A little.
We'll spend the night at the Lee House. We'll be in New York by tomorrow evening. How's that sound?
Wonderful. With you. This, of course, was our honeymoon. And later in life, I thought that it was quite natural that we should begin our married life together with a church conference. For that was why we were stopping in Washington. The New York Avenue Presbyterian Church had been looking for a new pastor for a long time. Peter had supplied the pulpit in June and again in September. A church meeting had been called for the evening of November 5th, which was the next day. That is why we were to meet the pulpit committee early in the morning. But there's more to the story, and perhaps now would be the best time to look back a few months and see how God had marked out the path. Mr. Carnes is waiting to see you, Dr. Marshall.
Thank you, Ruby.
Good morning, Pastor.
Good morning, Mr. Carnes. Have you been waiting long?
No. Are you very busy?
Not at all. Beautiful day, isn't it, Mr. Carnes?
Yes. I don't know how to begin, Mr. Marshall.
Something troubling you?
Yes. It's about your going to Washington again.
Oh. News certainly gets around.
Well, I think you ought to know our people are becoming quite perturbed.
Yes, that's what I understand.
Can you tell me if they are calling you to be their pastor?
No, frankly, they're not. Here's the situation, Mr. Carnes. The church, the New York Avenue Church in Washington, has been without a pastor for some months. They asked me to come and supply the pulpit. That was last June. Now they've asked me to do it again. I can't very well refuse, since they were so kind to me before. But I can tell you quite frankly, no call has been extended to me.
Well, that satisfies for a while. We'd certainly hate to lose you, Mr. Marshall.
You're kind to come to the station, Mr. Eddington.
I was glad to, Mr. Marshall. Again, may I say that we enjoyed your ministry with us.
Thank you.
And, you can't give me an answer?
What can I say? You won't take no for an answer?
Well, our congregation is united in wanting you. We've had 2 meetings about it. The call is the same.
I've told you how I felt, Mr. Eddington. I must know if God wants me to come to Washington. For myself, well, humanly speaking, I don't feel qualified by experience or education or anything else to assume so great a responsibility.
You will pray about it.
Oh, of course.
I wouldn't want to rush you in your decision, Dr. Marshall, but I hope you'll know soon.
I hope so, Mr. Eddington. You see, pressure is being exerted from 2 sides. This has been only my 2nd visit with you. Yet you and dozens of others have been trying to convince me to make this move. On the other hand, there are dozens in my own church urging just the opposite. I must have time to evaluate and pray and decide. I must not take one step away from God and His will for me.
Good morning, Dr. Marshall. Welcome back.
Thank you, Ruby. Just keep on with your work if you like. Any mail I should attend to?
A few letters here. A couple you probably won't want to read.
Oh? Where are they?
Here they are.
You. It's unsigned.
It's from a member of the church. Sure of that.
Listen to this. When you get to the nation's capital, what will there be for you to look forward to? You will have arrived. You can't have the enthusiasm to keep striving when you have already attained the heights. Remember that the Lord Himself is taken up into the high mountain and shown all the kingdoms of the world. I refuse to say to myself that it's just as I expected.
It's not very Christian, is it?
I guess I can understand how people feel, but Ruby, I hate these intimations of ulterior motives, these insinuations of personal ambition and financial reward. Particularly when I still don't know what God wants me to do.
Well, Pastor, the balcony will soon be a reality.
Yes, the men are doing a good job, Mr. Carnes.
We'll be able to seat 400 more people.
Oh, that's wonderful. We've been needing the space.
You certainly can't leave us now, Dr. Marshall. You're the one responsible, and we are going $15,000 into debt.
How are the wedding plans, Catherine?
I'm just finishing the announcement list.
Hard to believe it's only 3 weeks away.
Calendars don't lie. Peter,
Yes, Catherine?
have you decided about Washington?
Yes. I sent them an airmail letter yesterday. They must have received it by now.
Well, don't keep me in suspense. What was your answer?
Catherine, I believe a call of God is a two-sided one. A call to a work and a call from a work. And I believe God sets both in motion at the same time. This has not been the case. So, I decline the Washington pastorate. Yes, Ruby?
This telegram just came for you from Washington.
Thank you, Ruby.
Did Ruby say it was from Washington?
Yes. Happy to inform you, full pastoral committee overwhelmingly voted to recommend to congregation that call again be extended to you. Stop. Meeting of congregation called for November 5th. Regards.
And so we had now come to November 5th, with decision and indecision behind us. We were staying at Lee House in Washington, managed by Mr. Martin, who was also chairman of the pastoral committee. And of course, as I told you, this was the first day of our honeymoon.
Good morning, darling.
Morning. Oh, is it morning already? Peter, you're up.
Is that surprising?
And that look on your face as though you were saying, how did this happen to me?
Oh, nothing of the kind. Catherine, I was just thinking what a wonderful creature my wife is.
I suppose you tell that to all your wives.
How'd you guess? Catherine, the pulpit committee is meeting upstairs. There won't be time for breakfast, so I'll just go on up. I'll phone you when they're ready to meet you. Do you mind?
Well, I do, but go ahead.
I've called Catherine. She'll be here in a few minutes.
Fine. What is your final decision, Dr. Marshall? We'd like to have something concrete to report to the congregation tonight.
Mr. Eddington, I'd like to ask the committee a question. Just why do you want me as your pastor? You've had many more able men than I in your pulpit. I know you have.
Let me answer that, Dr. Marshall. It's hard to analyze exactly why we want you, but for one thing, your preaching is unforgettable. You've made Christ real to us.
And that, first of all, is what we want in a pastor.
But even if the congregation should extend another call, I may not be able to come to Washington for many months.
We're quite willing to wait. We've waited a long time already, and some more, Dr. Marshall.
You see, we've undertaken a building program in Atlanta, and many feel I should remain until the debt is paid. I agree, since it was under my ministry that the building began. And it does involve $15,000.
Well, our church is antiquated and inadequate, and we have a debt, too. $130,000.
Is this your wife, Dr. Marshall?
Oh, yes. Catherine, over here. I want you to meet these friends.
Will you come to Washington, Dr. Marshall, if the call is unanimous?
Well, that would be the only kind of call I would consider, Mr. Eddington.
I see.
Catherine, these are the members of the pastoral committee. Let me introduce you. Mrs. Johnson, Mrs. Marshall.
How do you do?
How do you do? Mrs. Marshall, we're so happy you could stop in Washington on your way to New York. I hope you won't mind combining business with a honeymoon.
So you're presenting your resignation tonight, Pastor.
Yes, Brother Carnes. Believe me, it's been a hard decision. Atlanta has been good to me, and I'm grateful.
Well, I guess we've become somewhat reconciled to your leaving. It's been almost a year since you first went to Washington, hasn't it?
Yes. The New York Avenue Church has been patient, but insistent.
And meanwhile, they've done without a pastor for 17 months.
That's right. There's no mistaking the call, Brother Carnes. The church has voted unanimously, and they are somehow convinced that I should be there. I honestly believe it's God's will.
Well, I suppose we must abide by your decision. We'll miss you, Dr. Marshall, but God's blessing on you.
Well, Catherine, it's off to Scotland we are.
You've got the tickets?
Yes, on the Caledonia. Our first vacation together. 3 months in Scotland. Oh, my mother will be so glad to meet you.
You're sure the church won't mind, Peter?
Better take the vacation now than later. We'll be very busy when we get back. They want us to stop over in Washington before we sail, however.
Yes?
There's to be an installation service, and they want us to see the manse.
Oh. And afterward we'll sail from New York?
Yes. Something wonderful about that?
Yes.
What?
It sounds just like our honeymoon.
And so we conclude Chapter 12 in the transcribed story of Peter Marshall, Chaplain of the United States Senate. The story is based on Catherine Marshall's recent biography of her husband, A Man Called Peter. This is another in the series of stories of great Christians which come to you from the radio studios of the Moody Bible Institute in Chicago.